Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started momentarily. We are letting more neighbors come in and we will jump right in. We're going to start off with some official BNCA business led by Joe Miller, and then we'll jump into the conversation regarding the Brooklyn Metro.
Are we ready? Okay. Oh, I am not able to share my screen. There we go. Okay, let's see. We will do the treasurer's report for November and December of 2023. So November was pretty easy. We entered the month with $7,486.28 in the account. We only had one expense for the month of $10 going to web services. So that left us with $7,476.28 in the account. We still have $969.33 as part of the sign beautification fund kind of side pot. So that leaves us with $6,506.95 of spending money for that month. And then to keep things moving, I will jump over to December. So this month is a little more interesting because we did our typical holiday donations. So again, entered $74.76.28. We had two deposits. One was the PayPal recurring dues and donations of $276.87, and one check for $20 for members' dues. We made 7 donations this month, all for $150, to Art Enables, to Dance Place, to Mary's House, to the Ronald McDonald's House, Deaf Reach, DC Doors, and the Greater Brooklyn Intergenerational Village. We had intended to do 10 donations. 2 of the groups we were trying to donate to never responded to any any solicitations for donations, and so one of which I think we might be able to work out. And then one of the other donations I was able to make early January, so that'll show up in the January treasurer's report. That all being said, we ended the month with $6,723.15 in the account, and did not spend any of our sign balance, and so that left us with $5,753.82 for spending money going into 2024. And then, as we've been doing for the last, I think maybe last year was the first one, but just a quick pie chart of our expenses over the year. As you can tell, the vast majority of our spending went straight into donations back into the community, over 54%. Another 26% went directly into the sign beautification. The rest primarily went to maintaining our status as a civics association, dues and other fees associated with that to the DC services. So that will conclude the treasurer's report unless anyone has any questions.
Thanks, Joe. This is Kathy Jaguar, president of the BNCA. I'm not sure if we can do this or not, if people have the ability to put something in the chat, but we typically vote on these. So if anybody, unless anybody has any questions about the treasurer's report, I'd ask members of the BNCA in good standing to vote on approving the treasurer's report. And so all those in favor, Melissa, can they say take themselves off mute or no?
I could do
Probably
that.
not.
It would take me a minute though, so it'd be easier.
Okay,
to
never
do it
mind.
via the
Yeah.
chat.
So maybe raise your hand or put, yeah, this is a webinar. I'm not as familiar with this format. So I think make it a little executive. Okay, in favor. Okay, people can put voting members. Just put if you're in favor. Okay. Yes.
Kathy, and I'll second that. So
yeah, thanks. Okay. Anybody opposed? Okay, I think the report is approved. Thanks, Joe.
Good working. Yep.
So we can move on to the meat of our meeting, and again, would like to thank well, not again, but would like to thank Councilmember Parker for joining us tonight and for everybody's flexibility. We had hoped to be in person, but given the weather and everything, this works out, and we're happy we have this option. So really tonight is focused on the future development at the Brookland-CUA metro station. We've talked about it before in the BNCA, including a few months ago related to the transit facilities. We provided feedback on that. We're waiting for a report from WMATA compiling the feedback on that. Haven't seen that yet. But tonight we want to look ahead to the future joint development. And we thought it would be useful to talk about the map amendment and PUD processes, and to talk about eventually, possible community benefits of this project. So I'd like to turn it over to Councilmember Parker at this point.
Thank you, Kathy, and to all of the members of the Brookland Neighborhood Civic Association. I am thrilled to be with you tonight. Just to level set, Melissa Little-Page is here from my team. She'll be helping to navigate the controls tonight. And Connor Shaw, too, from my team is here, who will be assisting. And the goal of tonight's conversation is to provide as much information that we have to date about process and engagement and timeline, and to answer any questions that you have. What I would say from the outset is nothing has been decided, nothing has been finalized, and you as neighbors are in the driver's seat of the future of the Brooklyn Metro Station. I am also seeking insight on two very specific questions that I'll make clear as we go throughout the presentation. Today is just one of several engagements. This isn't the beginning or the end. As you know, this has been an ongoing process, and we anticipate that will continue throughout the year and the months to come. But what I also want to leave people with is a sense of excitement and possibility of what could be at the Brooklyn Metro Station and for Brooklyn and Ward 5 generally. And it is a level of excitement that I think comes with the promise of expanding affordable housing and responsible development that can both meet some of our very tangible needs of more housing, but also community needs of certain amenities and things that we appreciate about Brooklyn. So all that to say, I'm looking forward to tonight's conversation. This will be one of several to come, and I'm happy to stop as we go along to answer any questions you have. Feel free to use the chat to elevate questions. You can also utilize the Q&A function. If you are not sure how to do that, just chat Melissa or Connor on my team, and we're happy to help. I'm not sure we're going to be able to unmute people when it comes to the Q&A. Melissa is planning to lift up questions that we'll speak to. If you, for whatever reason, don't feel as though tonight's format is the best for you to get your question across, or the answer you may receive is not satisfactory, please follow up with us so we can be in touch and answer any questions you have. What you see here is our agenda for the conversation tonight. As I mentioned, we're going to give some high-level details about process, timeline, and engagement, and the bulk of our time is going to be around discussion and Q&A because I want to hear from you and learn about what's most important to Brookland neighbors as we move along in this process. So, up until this point, we've heard from WMATA and we've heard from the Civic Association about certain things we want to be true with this development process. Earlier in the fall last year, WMATA reached out with the possibility of teaming up on joint development projects that they are entertaining as part of their 10-year strategic plan. In this phase of their plan, they have identified 2 metro stations that they are looking to sell the land for and build development on. And those 2 stations are Brookland and Fort Totten. We are really excited about that because, again, it allows us to meet our housing needs and build for what's possible in our community. But there are some key differences. Brookland and Fort Totten have facility differences that mean the processes surrounding the potential development are different. And so if you are wondering why are we having certain meetings for Brookland that we're not having for Fort Totten, the simple answer is there are facility changes required at Brookland that are not required at Fort Totten, and those facility changes call for an additional step. You in September may have attended the meeting that WMATA hosted for their compact hearing. And that hearing was primarily about the changes to the kiss and ride changes at the facility and different structural improvements that they seek to make. That does not necessarily denote the development process. And so I just want to make sure that those 2 things are clear. But we're really excited about these 2 opportunities in our community. And tonight we're going to be focused exclusively on the Brookland Metro Station and the future development steps for that project. As I mentioned, with this development, it allows us to build more housing and meet our affordable housing goals. As you know, by 2025, the mayor has set a some 36,000 additional housing goal. Ward 5, I'm happy to share, is on track to meeting that goal as it relates to a proportional allotment across the city. And these developments will add to that so that more neighbors can call Ward 5 home, more neighbors can potentially call Brookland home. The development at the metro station in particular allows for more folks to live closer to transit. As we know, transportation is key. We also know we have a lot of work to do in terms of street safety and traffic safety. And so by developing more density near our metro stations allows us to put people closer to transportation, but also work towards our long-term goals of safer streets and a safer community overall. And it also allows for us to meet certain community needs. I've heard loud and clear that Brookland neighbors want more food access. They want more recreational outlets. They care very deeply about the green spaces that are available. And I've heard very clear from the Brookland Neighborhood Civic Association that the Brookland Green is a non-negotiable. And that is important for me to know as we move forward with WMATA. I'm going to move through this quickly. We actually can go to the next slide, but in 2021, the council took up the comp plan. We will take up the comp plan again in a few years. But in that process, it was made possible for medium-sized density and development at the Brookland Metro. It is worth noting during that comp plan process, the Brookland Green was saved. And so as a matter of code and through a matter of that process, the Brooklyn Green was preserved. And that is something, again, that is top of mind for me as we move forward. As I mentioned, in September, WMATA hosted its compact hearing. And to date, they have received over 600 responses. They usually receive a few dozen. And so it shows the level of engagement and interest that Brooklyn neighbors have for what's possible at the Brooklyn Metro Station. They anticipate that they will take a formal board vote and release a report sometime in March or April. And after that vote, and after that report is released, we'll be able to see what trends have been elevated by Brooklyn neighbors. What we've heard anecdotally from the WMATA team is that there is a lot of interest in traffic safety, bike infrastructure, and improved accessibility at the Metro Station. And so we look forward to that. So I'm going to actually, Melissa, ask that you go a couple of slides forward, and then I'm going to go back. Let's start right here. So one of the decision points, as I mentioned earlier, there are two that we as a team are looking to get out of tonight's conversation. One is the path forward. There is a choice to be made around whether to move forward with a map amendment or a plan unit development process, or a PUD process. As you can see here on the screen, there are differences between a map amendment and a PUD process. The PUD process often being characterized by a longer process in and of itself, with more engagement, more community benefits, and assurances for the future of that development. The map amendment process allows for many of those same engagements, but isn't as lengthy. At the same time, a map amendment allows for certain assurances for the developer and allows for a quicker development process overall. And so one question I have genuinely, and this is not me putting my finger on the scale one way or another, is do Brooklyn neighbors prefer a map amendment or a PUD process? And we have a survey for you at the end of tonight's call where we'll be asking that. And there's another prompt where you may say, we actually want more information around what this means, what it entails. For some of you who are steeped in this, you may already have an opinion, and we would love to hear it. I will say a few additional things here. Given now, Melissa, if you can go a slide backwards, given the unique nature of this development project, one of them being that WMATA would require a tax abatement, which would require council action and action from the Ward 5 Council office. There is leverage that we have, we being the Ward 5 community, in this process. There are ways in which we can have assurances for community benefits. And there has been a commitment from WMATA to have a process contingent on community feedback should we move forward with the map amendment process. Transparently, WMATA would like us to move forward with the map amendment, one, because it allows for more assurances on their side and the developer side, but it also moves the process along a lot quicker. And what they've shared with us is that they would be willing to have some contingencies for community weigh-in, feedback and weigh-in throughout the process if we were to agree to that. There is also the tax abatement that would be required that, again, will take council action. There's also an opportunity for the community to weigh in regarding zoning for the project and how this project would mesh with the comp plan and the future land use map. And so those are two distinct opportunities for the community to provide feedback, regardless of how we move forward. All right, let's move forward. Melissa? And we are gearing up. I believe, Kathy, you have a prompt. I think you wanted to reiterate some of the commitments that the BNCA has sent along to WMATA. And so feel free to lift those up. But again, the two questions that I have for you tonight is there a preference for a map amendment or PUD process or PUD? And what community benefits would you like to see here at the future Brooklyn Metro? Whether that's infrastructure, whether those are certain amenities, reinforcements to something that is already there. And if you are not fully aware of what's possible in terms of community benefits, as a follow-up, we can share some examples of community benefit agreements that have been approved in other communities that might, jog some ideas for you all. So that's it for me. Kathy, I'm happy to turn it over to you to lift up some of the non-negotiables, as I would put it, that the BNCA has, and then we can open it up for questions.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Parker. In feedback that we provided to WMATA back in September, which was specifically on the transit facilities, but we took the liberty of sharing a little more broadly on the future development. As you mentioned, the maintaining the Brookland Green is a non-negotiable. Traffic safety, as you mentioned, another big concern. So build in road safety from the start, preserve pedestrian access from the station to Newton Street, provide bike access from Bunker Hill to Monroe Street, and take steps to minimize bus traffic impacts. That's related to traffic safety. In addition, some of the principles that we would like to see and want to hold WMATA to is adopting a holistic approach. There's a lot of development that's going in around that area, not just the WMATA metro site, but across the tracks, Michigan Avenue, and across on Michigan Avenue, on Monroe Street, and then across Michigan Avenue on 10th Street, looking at potentially in the next, who knows, 5 to 10 years, but 2,000 more units potentially in that area. That's a lot of additional people and traffic, et cetera. So we would like to see WMATA looking not just at their property, but kind of how it relates to other things that are going on in the neighborhood. Supporting affordable housing, so looking beyond the minimum to provide more affordable housing, limiting additional parking since it is right on top of the metro, building green, so mitigating any negative environmental effects with the state-of-the-art green construction, and supporting local businesses, minority-owned, women-owned businesses to the extent possible, and even going above and beyond. So those are some of the principles that we have shared with WMATA and that we will continue to insist on. And kind of overarching this is just meaningful and transparent engagement with the Brookland community.
Thank you. Those are very powerful commitments, and I'm in alignment with them, and I appreciate them. We're going to turn now for Q&A, and Melissa will help us guide participants and neighbors through that. I believe we have 2 questions in now, so feel free to use the Q&A function if you haven't already, or you can use the chat and we'll navigate through this process. As you're doing that, I just want to reiterate some things. For me, my non-negotiable is doing anything without the support of Brooklyn neighbors. So you have my commitment that as we move forward through this process, I will endeavor to engage, over-communicate, and ensure that the project is in alignment with the broader Brooklyn community's perspective. It is worth noting, and I appreciate it, Kathy, what you sent over to WMATA spelled out clearly. I support the development. I think development at the Brooklyn Metro Station, and I heard in your statement on behalf of the BNCA, there is a good thing. It allows for us to expand housing, meet our affordable housing goals. We're talking anywhere from 400 to 500 units. I also appreciated Kathy reiterating a push for greater affordability. And so that is something that we'll be keeping an eye on, especially as WMATA needs the council to weigh in via a tax abatement. And the last thing I would just say is the question now is what is the best path forward? And for me, I want to maximize opportunities for the community to weigh in while also ensuring that we can execute this project as fast as possible without any surprises. So with that, happy to engage in questions.
If I could just add one other thing, and then I'll ask something, but I think another thing that I failed to mention was that we would like to see any development keep in the character of the neighborhood. There is, Brookland is an established neighborhood, and we would like to see, we're not, saying any particular, anything too specific at this point about architecture or whatever, but there is a character to the neighborhood, and I think people would like to see that preserved. I also think that, you will find a mix of opinions on the BNCA, and so we are open to hearing folks, what their opinions, but what I just shared a little while ago is more or less the consensus, of the association. I wonder if maybe we could have that one slide with the map amendment PUD kind of compare and contrast, just to understand a little bit better what the difference is. And I guess when you say it's a quicker development process, like what exactly does that mean?
I think it's the other slide, Melissa. And while Melissa pulls that up, Connor, do you want to shed more light here in terms of process?
Sure, I'm happy to explain this a little bit. So first of all, there are actually 3 options on this slide, and I want to make clear that the matter of right development is not an option here because although the future land use map was changed in the last comprehensive plan, there is still a need for Metro to update the zoning on these parcels to move forward with any residential or commercial project. It is also worth emphasizing that both the zoning map amendment and the PUD process have to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So for that reason, the change in the future land use map preserving the Brookland Green is going to be binding on a development pitched under either process. That there is no way for Metro under the current comp plan to rezone what has been identified as the Brookland Green there. So just important context, I think, for folks to keep in mind. PUDs are a way for developers to essentially negotiate with the community for the ability to build extra density in exchange for essentially a bunch of negotiated community benefits. And the advantage to the community is that those benefits are they are listed in detail and they are part of the zoning commission's order and are therefore enforceable. I think the risk from the developer's side is that sometimes those negotiations can be pretty protracted, and sometimes they might not get the support of the community. And so they're viewed as, a little bit more risky, say, than a map amendment, which is more straightforward because it doesn't require the same kind of negotiation with the community. There is still opportunities for input, certainly in the zoning commission case. I'm sure many people are familiar with these sorts of projects coming through the BNCA and then the ANC and then the zoning commission. But the fundamental question is whether the map amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan, not an intense negotiation of community benefits. Now, what the council member said at the outset is this project is a little bit different because Metro is coming to the council and saying, for any project to be viable here, we need some help on the financial side because it costs us money to prepare this site for potential development. Mainly, it's going to cost the money to change the transit facilities there. So for that reason, we and the community have some leverage in terms of negotiating community benefits, regardless of which of these processes regardless of which process is chosen. And so I think that's the shortest overview I can give with that.
So they are coming to the city council for additional funds.
That's correct.
And with a PUD, you said there could be there's a kind of negotiation to get more density, sort of in exchange for community benefits. So just to be clear, that means through a map amendment, it would be less dense, so fewer units, or what does that mean exactly?
In terms of the zoning permissions, that's technically correct. I think I can't speak to the details because I don't work for Metro and I'm not scoping out the projects. I think the reality of the world we live in terms of financing projects like this is that there is a maximum amount of density right now that is viable, frankly, and that is most likely to be a 6-story building. So, one sort of a base that's concrete and then 5 stories of wood construction on top of that. And that's just the most cost-effective type of multifamily housing that can be developed at the moment. Right now, it is exceedingly expensive to build anything higher than that because you enter the world of having to do concrete floors all the way up. And that's just a much more expensive process. And the sort of per unit cost doesn't really get justified unless you are building something that is much taller than is possible under DC zoning code at the moment.
There was a question about the plan that was shared, and maybe Melissa, you could go to that slide. That the Brookland Green and possibly Brooks Mansion green space are significantly diminished by the new bus access aligned with Newton Street. This seems to be glossed over by WMATA. Buses aligned on the Newton 10th Street access is a safety nightmare. That is
something we'll have to get WMATA to weigh in on, but if we can document who submitted that question, we are happy to follow up on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely of interest to us. I mean, not just Sarah Woodhead. Yeah.
To jump in quickly, this is actually something I've looked at. DDOT has a right of way through there, and that is reflected in the current parcels if you look at the zoning map. So it is possible that there will be changes within that right of way. But the parcel that is that is the Brookland Green in the future land use map would not be impacted by either of the processes, the map amendment or the PUD. That said, a major, a potential community development could be improvements or guarantees of protection to green space that is technically within the DDOT right of way as changes are pursued either by Metro exclusively or Metro and DDOT in partnership.
Again, we'll engage WMATA on that and follow up with the community. I've heard loud and clear the Brookland Green is a prized possession that we want to maintain at all costs. And so I will move forward with that understanding.
Thank you. Caroline Petty, who is a former BNCA president, shared that there's a minor correction to the chart. Inclusionary zoning is required with a PUD approximately 10%, but the PUD process allows negotiation for more. So that was, Connor, did you want to?
That is correct. One of the the PUD process only allows for certain things to be negotiated with the community. It's relatively expansive, but it is a set list. One of the things that is frequently negotiated is additional affordable housing. Yes, that friendly amendment is appreciated.
And is it something that can be negotiated as a benefit in the map amendment under this sort of leveraged position that we have?
Yes, in short, yes. And I gave a preliminary floor of 30% affordable housing, and that is the entry point with which I am beginning discussions with WMATA. Nothing has been decided, but in terms of just trying to iron out what the dollar amount might come to, that's where I began.
Yeah, thank you. And then I see you answered a question about expected density, about 480 units. And that's across, there's a few different spots on the property where they're looking at developing. So like along the Michigan Avenue Bridge, the Kiss and Ride, and maybe somewhere closer to the tracks.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct. And that is an estimate as well.
Yeah. There's a question, is infrastructure being considered along with effects to the area in terms of increased heat? I'm not sure what that means.
I'm assuming they're referencing environmental aspects. That will certainly be part of our discussion. Also, there is now legislation guiding development in the district, which would also kick in here. I saw in the comments, Kathy, you mentioned green development. And so that type of feedback is important for us as we begin to iron out the details. What I will say is we are not there yet. And so the community will certainly have a say in terms of the scope and the aspects of the project, but we'll certainly want to make sure it adheres with all district policy advancing our climate goals.
Yeah, and thanks. I see Elise Scott, who is our communications director, that she clarified, and I think you're addressing that.
Yes.
People are asking if they can put their questions in the chat or Q&A. I assume both will look, either way.
Yes, and also if people want to use the raise hand function, we can bring them off mute to ask their questions. We do have one person with a raised hand right now if we'd like to bring them off mute.
Sure.
Okay. Gigi, I'm going to bring you off mute now. You should have the ability to unmute yourself now if you'd like to ask your question live.
Okay, yeah, this is Lamont Bessick, Gigi's husband. Let it be known that I'm the former recording secretary for the BNCA. Glad to be a part still. A couple of comments. One, I do have a master's in real estate development from Georgetown, been in commercial real estate for about 25 years. With regard to development at this site, it is my opinion there should be neither a map amendment or PUD. Both of those functions tend to add density to the sites. That's one point. Looking at this map, compact hearing, you have a building just north of Newton Street, which impedes or impacts the green, the Brookland Green. It should be noted that the Brookland Green should be protected after development as well as during development. I think we want to be careful in allowing any additional density at this site. The reason being, there's already one development site north of Michigan Avenue on 10th Street that's going to bring about 1,200 or so units. to this Brooklyn area. Any changes to, in my opinion, any changes to PUD or map amendments are also going to affect the Colonel Brooks site, which has been under litigation for several years. So when you start adding 1,200 units above Michigan Avenue, 480 units at the Brookland site, plus another several hundred units in the future at the Colonel Brooks site, that is a massive amount of activity going in this small compact area. If anyone has driven along Michigan Avenue or Monroe between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. during the weekdays, you already know it is a little traffic jam. So I'm just suggesting we be careful about adding density in here, and probably best to go with a by right development on this site. In the comments.
Thank you for that feedback.
I will say, we don't have to get into it, but I believe the project at 10th and Michigan, so north of Michigan Avenue, is about 380 units. We've met with the developer who's presented to the BNCA, and that's our understanding, is about 300 there. Not to diminish the fact that there's a bunch of other development going on in the area, which is, as was noted, adding density. Just going through some questions. Could you please give some examples of other things that can be negotiated under a PUD? Just for you again.
So as mentioned, you have the community agreements. And so in Edgewood right now, they are negotiating water runoff infrastructure, building codes and accessibility, investments in scholarships, painting and murals, and the list goes on. There can also be greater negotiations around density at the site, where the community has a greater, I don't want to say a greater say, but there is more engagement that provides greater leverage to the community. What I was offering earlier is that, given the unique situation that we're in, where WMATA is coming to us for a tax abatement that requires council action, my vote and advocacy on behalf of WMATA ensures that they need to be in alignment with what I'm advocating for on behalf of the Brooklyn community. Also, the WMATA team has offered to go into a legal agreement around contingencies that would allow for community engagement and say that is not normally afforded during a map process or a map amendment. I will say transparently, WMATA would prefer a map amendment. I will say that transparently. They would prefer it because it provides them more assurances. I want to ensure that we get the development that we want, but I also want to make sure that the community has a sufficient say. So the only way I will not move forward in that route is if the community resoundingly says, no, we demand that it be a PUD process. And for the comment earlier, a by right development is not possible here at this site. So the two options moving forward is a map amendment or going through the PUD process.
Right. One other thing, I just when the PUD that the BNCA helped negotiate at Reed Street with Hanover in the neighborhood, which has since the project is not going forward, but their farmers market and some common space were couple of the community benefits. Just to clarify again, Sarah was saying, are you saying the Brookline Green as it is now includes DDOT right of way that can be paved over? It sounds like yes, potentially, but we would like to, we'll just reiterate, we would like to preserve whatever it says, we want to preserve what's there now. So I think we're unequivocal on that.
Connor, I think that question was for you, but I hear you loud and clear.
Yeah. Are there any plans yet for bicycle facilities? I don't know if you all have an answer to that.
Do we have any commitments from DDOT on that?
Not from DDOT. The compact hearing was specifically about the the physical layout of the site. And so the staff report that Metro is working on right now is one that we expect to contain responses to those kind of comments from the community. That said, Metro has made clear that obviously any transportation improvements that fall within DDOT's right of way are still going to need to be DDOT projects. I think folks can expect Metro to come to the table with a site plan for their property that reflects community input. But there will likely be some things that the community and our office needs to engage DDOT on in parallel to that.
Thank you. Want to just mention there. Yeah, go ahead.
Or Kathy, I was just going to jump in to say, in addition to meeting monthly with DDOT and working very hard to advance the projects that are important for our community, are planning to convene stakeholders throughout the Brookland community to weigh in on matters of traffic safety, road enhancements, truck routes, and the list goes on, in an effort to improve in a more comprehensive way traffic safety in Brookland. We've gotten commitments early on from DDOT that they are willing to engage on that. What I would say, and I'm choosing my words wisely, we have an interim director and we have a process at DDOT that I don't believe allows for necessary special projects to move forward as efficiently as I believe they could. And so that is why, again, I'm working very hard with the DDOT director and the team, and they've been great, by the way, to move forward these projects. So if you're interested in that, please reach out. We're happy to give you more information. But the goal there is for us to think more comprehensively around what are the traffic safety needs for Brookland versus this one street off approach has been guiding us for a while now.
I think we would wholeheartedly support that as looking at kind of a more holistic approach. And I will choose my words carefully that we haven't always found WMATA to be a necessarily great partner in talking about some of the traffic issues that are faced in Brookland. A few comments, excitement about new housing, in the neighborhood and right near Metro. Some people definitely excited about that. There's a question: are there limits on what can be conditioned via tax abatement process? Unfortunately, WMATA and developers have a long history of breaking promises to the community. So in my view, a process that relies on promises and empty engagement is untenable. Any thoughts?
In short, yes. In short, and we are, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but we are building in contingencies with anything we move forward. I am looking both at the cost as well as the cost benefits that may come further down the line from any future development and who reaps those benefits, whether it be WMATA or the district, as well as contingencies for promises made and kept to Brookland neighbors. So 1000%, this will not be a blank check that is just written, but we will have some teeth in it to make sure that the community gets what it deserves.
Okay, and there was another comment, I guess, related to that WMATA has taxes to sue to get what it wants. So this could be handled if it comes to that.
I'm not understanding the question. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
I guess is there ways for WMATA to skirt the community input and sort of just do what it wants?
No, because the project is not financially viable without district investment. The district investment would need to come through legislation offered by my office, and that legislation will only come with the buy-in of Brookland neighbors.
And we've got a lot of questions, and just so folks know, we have built in time for this, so hopefully we can get to all these comments. But just there's a comment here about trash around on the WMATA property, including the areas that are meant to be developed, and it's really pretty bad along Michigan Avenue Bridge, and I myself have called 311 many times, and it's a problem. So would like to know what we can do to ensure that WMATA keeps the area clean, both before development occurs and after. So maybe, yeah.
We can certainly flag that for the WMATA team. What I would ask, Kathy, is as you get those requests, if you can loop in our office, either by flagging it for Melissa or letting Oliver, our constituent services coordinator for the Brookland community, know, we will put in that request. And as well as we are planning to monitor this development process very closely. And so that too could be one of the things that we have an agreement around in terms of trash pickup, but also access to and from the site.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Another point about the Brookland Green, but that there really needs to be a buffer to protect the trees that are there, and that's actually a very important point.
Yes.
So not just the green that's there, but making sure that the construction doesn't kill the trees that are there. So I think that's a good point. Somebody asked if that has always been there, if it was added when the metro stop was built. If anybody knows the answer to that, the Brookland Green, if that's just always been there or if it.
I thought I saw Mary give some history about it in the chat. I may have missed it.
Maybe haven't gotten there
but
yet.
She
Yes.
writes, the current Brookland Green used to be single family homes that were taken under eminent domain. And the original plan was to turn that parcel into a parking structure, which the community at the time successfully blocked.
Yeah, great, thanks. I've not scrolled that far. Let's see, Rory, Councilman, how confident are you that you can negotiate successfully directly with WMATA if we can get what we want through the MAP process? That seems like the best of both worlds, benefits plus speed. Yeah.
I don't disagree with you. I am confident we can negotiate with WMATA. We have been having ongoing conversations. What I would also share is that WMATA has broader needs that will soon come before the council in terms of making sure that they're solvent and that financially viable as a institution. And so there are many leverage points. I also believe WMATA has been negotiating in good faith. I have had no reason to discount their engagement, but anything that I would commit to would be done so legally. And so it wouldn't just be a handshake, but more so if we are offering a tax abatement, there are certain contingencies baked in to any policy that we will move forward.
Great. A comment about cautiously excited for some additional housing and development, but would hope that development would be compatible with the adjacent character of the neighborhood and enough buffer space is preserved for the Brookland Green. So I think,
and maybe not now, but I would really love to better understand that comment in terms of neighborhood character. In terms of what neighbors mean by that. Is it the design, the feel, the height of buildings? Is it the...
I will just share what I've heard from some neighbors is more like what's on the west side of Monroe. I mean, west side of the tracks along, Monroe, the buildings along newer buildings along there versus, for example, what's at Rhode Island Avenue. So just a little, more traditional look and feel, not something that's just a completely, different Brookland's established neighborhood, more traditional housing, that sort of thing.
Got you.
I don't know if you've heard of anything about this comes up as well about possibilities for like grocery stores with the increased density and hope that people won't have cars because they're living right near the metro, but will there be any? grocery
A few
store?
things on that. We are too early in the process to guarantee a grocery store, but if that is an amenity that Brooklyn neighbors want us to move forward, that is certainly something that we would push for. We did in a preliminary way ask if that would be possible at this site, and I believe the answer, Connor, correct me if I'm not remember correctly, was yes. A small in grocery store could be located at this site in the future. Again, no decisions have been made there in terms of traffic and parking. That too is something that I'm sure will come up in terms of community engagement with the zoning office, but also with WMATA directly. One of the things that separates the Brookland site from Fort Totten, as you know, are the massive parking lots at Fort Totten. And so there are very different parking considerations that we have to take into account. But nothing, again, has been decided. Connor, anything on the food access or grocery store at this location?
One thing that I would flag is that this site, like many parts of Ward 5, is actually already subject to a potential tax abatement if a development were to include a grocer of some kind. The other thing I would just add is that, you know, with any community benefits package, be it one that's baked into the PUD, whether it's one that is essentially written into tax abatement, there is always going to be a bottom line for the other side. And so any benefit, you know, it's good for communities to negotiate aggressively over benefits. That said, the benefits also have to be ones that at the end of the day allow for Metro and its development partners to want to do the project. So I think for all of us, we have to think about, you know, which benefits are the most important, which ones we want to prioritize, because, you know, it is possible to so burden a project with benefits that it is just not feasible, and therefore no benefits ever come because the project just doesn't move forward.
There was a comment about the parking, you know, the kind of logic that being right near the metro will lead to fewer cars, which is not necessarily always the case. But if there's some ways to mitigate, you know, we say people will, you know, live right next to metro, and so they won't have cars, so we don't need as many parking spaces in the units. But that may or may not be sound logic. A lot of people who live right near metro, myself included, have a car. I think that's something that you know, really needs to be thought through.
Yes, there will be a lot of consideration to parking spots and space allocation. What I will say is that is not one of the entry points for discussion for me. I've leaned in more focused on the affordability of the project, as well as what community benefits we can guarantee for Brooklyn neighbors. And so if that is something that is important to neighbors, that we have X number of parking spots, please flag that for us so that can help guide us moving forward.
I think you already answered a question about the estimate of proportion of affordable housing versus market rate housing. You said you're going to, you know, kind of start with 30% would be your entry.
Yes. And that is, for me, where I believe all government invested development should start. Operative word there is start. It's worth noting that, there was another development, a significant development in the ward that is now not moving forward. And I think part of the tension was around where the affordability numbers we're going to fall. So I can't say right now that's exactly where it will be. But again, WMATA is asking of something from the district, and I think they need to in turn provide some guarantees for affordable housing.
There's another comment about the timeline for development for the WMATA development as it relates to the timeline for the Brookland Lanes development on the north side of Michigan along 10th. I can just share that and you all may have some info, but we have spoken with the developers. Their timeline is not set yet because they are looking for financing. I think they're hoping within the next, year or two. But they have yet, at least right before the holidays, they had yet to secure financing for that. But the commenter also says we need to look holistically at these two large developments. And that is, again, one of our big points is we cannot be looking in isolation, at the Brookland metro development. It's really in a larger context of several development units or projects.
What I can say of what I know so far, March or April, WMATA will take that vote. They will also release that compact hearing report with over 600 responses from Brookland neighbors and others. Moving forward, I would say sometime in the spring, tentatively, we would take action on structuring an agreement between the community and WMATA by way of a tax abatement proposal. And in terms of changes to the actual Brooklyn Metro site that the compact hearing sought to allow neighbors to weigh in on, it's my understanding that those changes won't come about until a developer has been selected. And so you're talking anywhere from another 12 months or so plus before those changes are made and a developer is selected. We would then move through either the map amendment process or a PUD process where there will be a lot of community engagement, both led by the BNCA, my office, but as well as with other agencies like the Zoning Commission.
Caroline Petty has asked a question about the tax abatement. Is what they're pursuing an existing statutory tax abatement? For example, something called HANTA, H-A-N-T-A. If so, how much affordable housing is required under the tax abatement and what other terms, length, for example, length of time for the affordability?
Great question. This would be a new proposal, not an existing tax abatement. And none of the details have been worked out. We are, I want to say, looking at 100 years or so, and that's a rough estimate. But the thing I'm looking at, in addition to the affordable units, is how we manage costs in the future of any net positives for the development project moving forward. And that money, I feel strongly, should benefit the district versus WMATA being able to pocket that money. That's a little bit in the weeds. But to answer your question, Caroline, no, this is not an existing tax abatement. Will be a new proposal. And we have some models that we're looking at from other tax abatements in the region outside of the district that is giving us insight to how we might structure this in a way so it's a win-win for the district.
Great. And you said that by right is not an option. And somebody's asking why is it not? And I can't recall if you said why it is not an option.
It is, I will let Connor weigh in on that, but it is our understanding that the adjustments via the comp plan won't allow for it to move forward in a matter of right development way. But Connor, feel free to color in more there.
Sure. The parcels in question are not zoned for residential or mixed use at this point. So there has to be a zoning change to allow for housing. And that zoning change needs to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. That's a fundamental determination that the zoning commission needs to make in any change to zoning.
There was a comment about, or referring to some developments in other parts of the neighborhood, but that have led to rats, a rat invasion.
Yes.
Definitely concerned about that, especially with all the future digging that will be happening. So we would certainly want there to be some mitigation.
Absolutely. I can't make any guarantees around the rats. Obviously, we're disturbing the ground, and that is a concern across Ward 5 and even the district. I know there are some efforts underway via DC Health to treat more comprehensively neighborhoods via rat abatements, but I'm happy to share more information, and that will certainly be something we keep in mind.
So several questions about pedestrian and bike safety. The Michigan Avenue 10th Street intersection is been, perennially a bad, really dangerous intersection, and with, potentially a lot more people and cars and bikes with all this development. So that just absolutely has to be considered, as part of any development. So a few more comments about parking, and I think there's sort of back and forth on people who are living literally on top of the metro should not have really parking, but then that, it'd be good to know data on some of the other developments in near metro stations. I think we don't really know what the reality is. Do people that live near or on metro that don't necessarily have parking spaces for everybody in the unit, do they have cars, and do they park in the neighborhood? I don't know if that's possible to, if that's part of any, traffic studies or anything like that. Okay.
I would just say, and I may regret this later, I know parking spaces often become a fault line in many of these debates, and I don't mean to just diminish that. And so we will certainly take that into consideration. I would not want us to go into this development, and I'm not suggesting that's what you, Kathy, or anyone else is suggesting, but I would not want us to go into this prioritizing parking spots, and instead use this as an opportunity to meet housing needs, especially affordable housing needs. Yes, we need parking. Yes, we need to make sure people have access to transportation. I would not say that that is a top line priority for me personally. If neighbors say that's important for them, it will be important for me. But I want us to just keep our eye on what's possible here. And that is that we can expand housing, which ultimately would drive down costs in the long run for everyone, but in the short term, meet our housing goals. So just throwing that out there.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think there's concern about, encroachment on most of us have street parking, in the neighborhood. And if there's, down the road, 2,000, units, and half of those people have cars and don't have parking spaces in their units, what does that mean? So there's a concern. There's a question about back to community benefits, but and this has not come up yet, but will schools be prioritized to receive resources from those agreements? So, I mean, might that be something that if we did a map amendment, for example, you think about something that could be beneficial to the schools in the neighborhood?
1,000%. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And there are, as I mentioned, scholarship programs, there are after-school programs, playground enhancements, you name it, that have been part of these type of benefit agreements. I also just want to shout the BNCA out for those that may not know. Several months ago, you teamed up with my office to support Noyes Elementary. There was an incident where many of their pre-K rugs and toys and class materials were destroyed. And so the BNCA invested money to ensure that they could start the school year off on a strong foot. So thank you all again for that.
You're welcome. Thank you for initiating that. So I think we've come to the end of comments and questions. I think you've heard a lot. Okay, here's another question about, could these these developments cause future increases in property taxes?
That is something that we want to keep in mind. I can't answer that. I would say there is a possibility in the short term. I don't think it would be a drastic increase in property tax values. That said, I have seen in some other communities, community benefit agreement is almost like a tax fund, and I'm not sure if that's what it's called, where especially senior residents or residents that may have bought their homes for a fraction of what they would be worth now or in the future could tap into that fund to cover any increased tax costs. And so, for instance, in Michigan Park, that was part of their benefit agreement, and that too could be part of a benefit agreement set out in the Brookland community. Obviously, you would want to put parameters around that and who benefits for how long, and how can you distill an increase in tax rates based on this development versus other things, but that is a possibility.
Yeah, I think we would be very concerned about WMATA getting a tax abatement and our taxes going up. So,
I would be very concerned with that too.
There was another question that I now have about wondering, maybe if you have the answer or not, but we've asked this before of developers, a lot of new development, and wondering about vacancy rates in the new development.
Yes.
Some developers have responded, basically, we wouldn't build it if we didn't think people would come. But I think there's a perception, right or wrong, that there are a lot of vacancies in some of these new buildings. Do you have any information on that?
We can get you information on vacancies. Right now, there is not, to my knowledge, a comprehensive accounting for building vacancies citywide. We rely a lot on the developers themselves versus there being a citywide accounting. Something we're looking at is a rental registry, transparently, and maybe I'm showing my cards. And there may be a host of benefits to something like that, including to keep account of how many units are vacant, but also to just make sure we level set on costs across the city. As you may have heard months ago, the Attorney General filed suit against several management companies because they were inflating the rents. And so a rental registry, some might argue, would allow for us to just monitor that. I would go with the thinking that WMATA is very clear of the need. There is a high need, and I believe Brooklyn is a community where a lot of people will want to live. So if we build it, I don't believe that it will sit vacant. That said, that should not have an accounting on any community benefit agreement, and that would be something we would have to work out with WMATA in the long run. So can have more information. We could circle back with more information that we have available, but we don't have any way of knowing what any future vacancy rates might be at this property.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that is it. There's a comment, it'd be great to see more family style units, 2-bedroom, plus
Yes.
size units. And a comment that some of the retail space, and that is true, has remained empty, in some of the newer places. Maybe not the residences, but the commercial spaces.
Love
Yeah.
it. Love it. Do we have more questions in the Q&A? Did we get to all of those?
I think we have gotten to all of the questions. Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming we're wrapping up early, which is not a bad problem. A few things I would just leave neighbors with. There on your screen is a form that you can provide feedback. In the chat, we're also dropping a link for you to provide feedback. We want to hear your input from tonight's call. your input on that question around should we move forward with a map amendment if there are certain contingencies we can guarantee, or do you demand we move forward with a PUD process, as well as what community amenities would you like to see in any future development at the Brooklyn Metro? And for what it's worth, I would, we're thinking more expansively around that question. What future amenities would you like to see in Brooklyn in general? So you don't have to limit it to this development, but that would help guide us. Kathy, on your end, what would be helpful is if you and the BNCA could also survey your members around those two questions, map amendment versus PUD, and amenities. Because again, we want to make sure we're being very thoughtful and intentional as we move forward. And so that would be helpful for us. In terms of next steps on our end, after tonight, we will, one, make the recording of this video available. We will also provide a summary in our Ward 5 weekly newsletter that comes out every Friday. If you are not already receiving it, we strongly encourage you to sign up. Kudos to Melissa, who knocks it out of the park with the newsletter. It is a labor of love, and we spend a lot of time throughout the week. So I hope that comes through as you're reading it. But we think it's important as we want to just educate you all on all of the important decisions that we're weighing in on a daily basis. As I mentioned, in April, WMATA will take a vote via its board on following feedback on that compact hearing, and they will make the formal process or the report available. We will be sure to share that out with you, as I'm sure the BNCA will also share that out. And then we will keep you up to date around the tax abatement proposal. At some point, I'm going to tentatively say this spring, we will come up with a proposal, and we will make that public and share if you care to weigh in, but we will be using feedback along the way to help us guide that and make sure the contingencies are baked in from the beginning. From there, as I mentioned, the WMATA will then put out an RFP for their developer, and once they've secured that developer, they will begin to work at the Metro station to make adjustments to the facility, and thereafter will begin the development. So that is a high-level next step. Kathy, I think I cut you off, so my apologies.
No. Thank you very much. Just a clarification. So you said you keep us up to date on the tax abatement proposal. And so what exactly the proposal? What's in it?
So what's the dollar amount? What's the timeline? What are the things that we're looking for in return from WMATA? The two things that I am going into the conversation clear-eyed about are the number of affordable units. The beginning point for us is 30%, and who benefits from any future financial benefits from this development. I believe that should be the district versus it going to WMATA.
Got it.
And those are two things that we're looking at as we're crafting the tax abatement.
On the RFP, is there a possibility to have any input into that? The community to have input into the RFP per se?
Yes, I'm gonna say the extent to which the community can have an input I will need to circle back on that, but yes. You could certainly have input. We will voice to WMATA that that's important for the community, and I'm sure they will be willing to oblige.
Okay. Lots of kudos to Melissa and your team for the newsletter. We love the newsletter, chock full of really good info. Love it when you mention the BNCA also.
I have a feeling you're going to be mentioned this week, so yes.
Yeah. And we will also, as you requested, get input on the two questions about the community benefits and MAP PUD. And we're just, yeah.
If you could do that by, let's say, the end of March, And
Yes.
even if sooner, that would be helpful because I would love to have clarity from your survey, our survey, as we're continuing to have these conversations with WMATA.
Great. Well, thank you very much. A lot of appreciation also just for having this meeting. We know you're busy. We know your team's busy, and we are very appreciative of you spending time with us, hearing
Yes.
the questions and concerns. And we just look forward to continuing to partner with you all as we, as this project develops.
Likewise, it's going to be great for our community, and I'm looking forward to working with you all on it.
Great. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Good night, everybody.